Hello there. My name is Leah Adams, and I am a Christian life coach, speaker, author, and mentor for women and girls. In 2007, the Lord called me into ministry, and then it was a speaking and a writing ministry. And pretty soon after that, I published my first Bible study, and it was about the legacy that we're leaving for the generations that come behind us. That's a super important topic that most people don't give a lot of thought to. Pretty soon after that, I was at an event where the Compassion Child Sponsorship Program was presented, and it really piqued my interest. Although I did not sign up to sponsor at that moment, I went home and began thinking about that. And I began thinking about how that really dovetailed beautifully with the topic of legacy, on which I spoke and wrote so very much. So in 2009, I sponsored my first child, a beautiful little girl named Ruth who lives in Tanzania. Shortly after that, I sponsored another little girl in Tanzania. And then in 2014, when my mom passed away, I assumed the sponsorship of her little girl in Colombia. So starting about 10 years ago or so, I began sponsoring children through Compassion. And I really believe in the mission of Compassion. Otherwise, I wouldn't have sponsored all these years. So fast forward to spring of 2019, and I had the opportunity to go to Peru with Compassion to visit some child development centers. We were a very small group, and we visited 3 child development centers while we were in Peru. Now, I didn't know what to expect, really. I mean, I knew we would see children. I knew we would see what was going on the ground in Peru, but I did not understand fully what the Lord had for me there in Peru. And so we visited a couple of different child development centers, and the children were so excited about getting to meet us and seeing us. And some of the people in our group actually got to meet their sponsored child while we were there, and that was thrilling. We got to see the work that Compassion is doing on the ground there in Peru and all over the world. We got to see the children in their classrooms learning about basic reading, writing, and arithmetic. They were also learning about nutrition and hygiene. There were the workers there in the Compassion Center who are awesome, many of whom are volunteers, and they are so dedicated to these children. We watched these children play and interact, and they were so excited to see us. They just wanted to hug us and love on us and have their picture taken with us. And it was just a thrilling time. We also got to visit some homes of children who were in the Compassion program and hear how Compassion has changed the lives, not only of those children, but of those families too. And so on the final day of visiting Compassion centers, this is the day that the Lord wrecked me, absolutely wrecked me. We were visiting a center in an area where gang activity is very, very prevalent, and a lot of problems come from the gangs in that area. And so the children and the staff were so excited to see us there, and they had fixed us a beautiful meal. We got to eat with them, and they had also prepared for us a program. And so once we got into the Child Development Center area, it was enclosed, it was gated because of the gang activity. They seated us in a courtyard under the beautiful Peruvian spring sun. And the children were standing around with banners and signs welcoming us. And they had prepared some speeches. The pastor of the church where the Compassion Center was located spoke, and the director of the center spoke, and then some of the children, the older children, actually spoke. And then there were 4 or 5 young men who led us in worship. And it was such a beautiful time because they sang some songs that we knew, although they were speaking in another language. We knew the tunes and could sing along. But then there were some songs that we didn't know. And what we found out from the director of the center as she spoke is that these young men were either currently enrolled in the child sponsorship program, or they had been and they had graduated out of it and moved on either to college or just to serving in their community. And one of the young men who was kind of the leader of the group, his name was Junior. And he was just such a dynamic young worship leader. And we discovered that Junior was 25 and he had gone all the way through the child sponsorship program and had graduated and then gone to college. But he was back there leading worship. And y'all, as I sat there and watched those young men lead worship, I began weeping because although I didn't really realize it, somewhere in the back of my mind, I had always wondered, does compassion really do what they say they will do? Are they the real deal? And it was in that moment, as I watched those young men who could have been anywhere. They could have been at work, at a job that was paying them money. They could have been out on the streets. They could have been in gangs. They could have been anywhere. But the child development program through Compassion had so impacted their lives that they were standing there praising the Lord and leading worship for us and for those children. They were leaving a legacy because someone else had poured into their lives by sponsoring them and left a legacy for them. I just sat there and had an ugly cry. It was so ugly that the leader of our tour group came over to me and said, "Leah, are you okay?" I'm like, "Oh, yes, I'm okay." And I shared with him what the Lord had just showed me about the Compassion program. And later on in the day, he shared with us that Junior had actually come up to him and had entered into a conversation with him. And our leader had said to Junior, "Why are you here? Why are you doing this when you could have been anywhere out working, making money?" And Junior said, "Because I received so much, I want to give back." And then he looked at our leader and he said this, "What do I need to do to sponsor a child?" Y'all, that just wrecked me because I knew in that moment that the legacy that I was leaving, because I was sponsoring 3 little girls, was not just something to make me feel good. It was to make a difference in their lives, in the lives of their families, and ultimately in the lives of their communities. The director of that final center that we were visiting told us that the child sponsorship program in that Peruvian community has made such an impact in the community at large that gang leaders are now coming to the center and asking for their children to be enrolled in the program. Y'all, that is huge. That is huge. Think of the impact. Think of the potential impact that Compassion is making in that community. The other thing I wanted to share with you about our time at the centers, and something that really impressed me, was that nowhere within these churches, all child development centers are housed in local evangelical churches in the countries in which they are. The whole time we were visiting those centers, we never ever saw a Compassion logo, the word Compassion, nothing that advertised Compassion International. And how odd, but not really. Because compassion, the heart of Compassion, is that the local church would be the face of these child development programs. And I love that. I love the local church. And I just love the fact that Compassion is setting the local church up to be the winner here. And so I want to invite you to join me as a sponsor and change the life of a child, change the life of a family and a community. How do you do it? It's so easy. You can either get a pack a child sponsorship pack if you have one available, or you can go online and go to the Compassion website and look for a child and sponsor them today. It costs $38 a month to sponsor a child. $38. So many of us use more than $38 a month on coffees at a coffee shop or going to the movies. And for $38 a month, you can change the life of a child. And in addition to sponsoring them and making sure they get good nutrition and schooling and mentoring in a local evangelical church, you can establish a relationship with that child. You can write back and forth to them. I have letters that my children and I have written back and forth over the years, and it's just my opportunity to encourage them, to tell them I love them, and that they are beautiful and they are important, and that they can achieve in school and in life. And so I just invite you to join me and leave a legacy in the life of a child in poverty. Help me, help Compassion rescue children from poverty in Jesus' name.